All right, skill practice A4, your essential pre-algebra skills, the baby steps that you need to know for the key points of the school year for pre-algebra in Virginia. Here you go. We have 5.37 times 10 to the 1 compared to 537%. If you take the one on the left and work it out, it becomes 53.7. If you take your percentage and make it into a decimal, you're going to get 5 37/100ths. Just by looking at the whole numbers, you see that it's greater. Moving on. Any number that's irrational. Now, what you can do is I'll have the problem up. You can pause it, try working it out, and then watch the rest. So we have irrational numbers are non-terminating, no pattern, and can't be a fraction. The only two that cannot turn into fractions are these two. Square root of 49, 7. You could think of 7. It's a terminating decimal. You could write it as 14 over 2. So everything else can be expressed as a fraction. Now a lot of kids will see that 0.42 repeating and they'll say, oh, it goes on forever, but it's a pattern. Same thing with this 7.2%. That 0.2, it's going on forever, but there's a pattern. So as soon as you see the bar, that means there's a pattern. So that means it is rational, and we wanted irrational. All right, square root of 90 is between what pairs of consecutive integers? Now you could just use your Desmos calculator and hit square root of 90. Ideally, you're understanding that on a number line, you've got square root of 81 and square root of 100 being 9 and 10. So square root of 90 is going to be between 9 and 10. Most likely for pre-algebra, all you need to do is worry about the positives, but be aware that it could occur on the negative side too, because negative 9 times negative 9 gives you 81, and so on. Moving on. Negative the square root of 225. Well, 15 times 15 is 225, and since there's a negative sign in front, they want the negative answer. They want that negative. The cost amount for a $95 dinner and having a 15% tip. You could go ahead and pause it and work it out. You could do a translation where you do 95 plus the tip amount. To figure out the tip amount, you're doing the 15%. You're doing the 15% of 95 and then just adding it onto the cost. When we did this in class, a lot of kids just said the answer was $14.25. They forgot that they're asking for the total cost. Proportion. You could think of this as saying, oh, well, they're looking for the cost, the total cost. You're taking 100% of the dinner plus 15% more. So you could use a proportion. You're paying for 115% of the meal. You could set it up like that. And you could do a cross product trick, and you get $109.25 either way. Next one, you've got principal, your loan rate, your time to pay off. If interest is the principal times rate times time, what is the interest amount? Take your numbers, multiply them. Make your 2.3% into 0.023, and then just multiply it out. And there you go. That's going to cost $82,800 to borrow $200,000 and pay it off over 18 years. Moving on. Okay, angles 6 and 2. Angles 6 and 2, well, they share a vertex, but they're not across from each other. They're not vertical. They're not next to each other. They don't share a ray. They don't add up to 180. They don't add up to 190. There's nothing. There's no special relationship. Nothing that you care about. Down the road, we'll talk about how all these cool relationships or cool things happen, but this didn't have much happening. All right, surface area and volume. Surface area and volume. They're asking for defined volume of a cone. You're going to use this formula. They give you some information here. For here, all you need to know is the radius and the height. You don't have to worry about slant height. Now, one thing I want you to notice, they give you diameter, but you need radius. So you need to be real careful. If the diameter is 6, your radius is going to be 3. Hopefully that's nothing brand new to you. And there's your volume. It's about equal to this. Moving on. Our original figure here, this block, is a 1 by 1 by 1 block. Its volume is 1 block, 1 cube. And then its surface area, well, I see 3 squares. I don't see 3 others, so that's a total of 6 squares. Now, if we multiply the length by 5, the length was 1, now it's 5. It's going to be 5 by 1 by 1. The dimensions don't really matter too much in their order. 5 by 1 by 1 is good to go. That's a total of 5 blocks that we're using. The surface area. 6 squares was covering the original cube. Now I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the front, 5 on the top, and 1 on the side. So that's 11 that we see, 22 total, because there's 11 that we don't see in this picture. All right, the transformation that took place from A to the image of A. Let's see the first choice, reflect over Y, reflect over X. Well, if I reflect over Y, it goes here, and then if I reflect over X, it goes up. That would work. And then let's see, -6 horizontal translation, that's left 6. 4 vertical, that would also work. Reflection over Y, and then vertical translation of 4, up 4, that would also work. Reflecting over X, and then a horizontal translation of -6, that would also work. Oops, that would also work. So all 4 of these worked. On a real test, I don't think you'd see anything like that, but just a possibility. All right, Pythagorean Theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. A and b are the legs. C is the hypotenuse. I'm going to go ahead and set up my formula. A squared, b squared, and c squared. Now, we didn't get c, but we know what a and b are. I'm going to plug them in. 12 times 12, 16 times 16. You work out what you can. I'm going to simplify the left side of this equation. I get 400. So c squared equals 14. C times c equals 400. So wait a minute. If you did the square root of both sides, square root of c squared is c, square root of 400 is 20. Your answer is 20. All right, we're going to keep going here. So now we have an area of a trapezoid. You can pause it, try to figure it out. You definitely can use Desmos for this. You've got your formula. Notice how my height is perpendicular to the 2 parallel sides. So your height's 5. Your 2 sides that are parallel, base 1 and base 2, are 7 and 5. You're going to add those together and then work it out. Just be aware that base 1 and base 2 are always parallel in these types of problems for trapezoids. We're going to move on. Probability. Flipping a 2 on an, rolling a 2 on a number cube and rolling a 3 on the other cube. The probability of rolling a 2 and a 3. Well, probability for rolling a 2 is 1 out of 6. Probability for rolling a 3 is 1 out of 6. There's 1, 2, there's 1, 3. So you just multiply them across, 136. You have a 1 in 36 chance of doing this, rolling a 2 then a 3. Independent or dependent? They're independent. One number cube, if I rolled a 2 on the 1 cube, I'm not more likely to get a 3. All right, next. So we've got our lower extreme. So this is a box plot. We're just learning how to read it right now. Your lower extreme is at the very end of the whisker. Don't say it's 10. Yeah, the number line shows 10, but the whisker ends at 11. And then the lower quartile is the left side of the box, which is at 17. The median is going to be at 23, 24, 25. I'm sorry, 21, 22, 23, 23 and a half. Your upper quartile is the end of the box, which is at 24. And your upper extreme is at 25. There we go. Okay, scatter plots. It's going downward from left to right. That's going to be a negative relationship. We're going to keep going. We're going to simplify this expression. We're going to regroup all of the variables that we can. Any term that is a like term, we're going to put them together. So I've got all these n's. 4n, negative 6n, negative 9n. That's negative 15n, and then plus 4. That's going to be negative 11n. Negative 7, 2, and 3. I'm going to get my 2's together. I'm sorry, my positives together. That's 5. 5 minus 7 gives you negative 2. Now you can use a Desmos calculator to kind of add and subtract if you're messing up your integer rules, but ideally you should know that. This expression is simplified. If we knew what n was, we could evaluate, but we can't do much else right now. Don't forget those integer rules. That's the big part where kids are messing up. Next, we're looking at functions. Actually, we're seeing if this is a function. And the fact that we've got an input of negative 2 giving me a 3, and then an input of negative 2 giving me a 1, the fact that the same input is giving two different outputs means that it's not a function. So no, it's not a function. Two of the same inputs give different outputs. If the outputs were the same, no big deal, but you can never have the same input give different outputs. So the domain for this is negative 2, 5. The negative 2 repeated, you only have to list it once. The range is going to be 1, 2, and 3, just ordered least to greatest. That's that. So here we go. We're going to get into a linear function. This is where a lot of kids were having trouble. I do have another video that I'll share on this. Linear functions. We have, first let's make the table. We're going to take our y equals 2x minus 4, and we're going to substitute in a 1 for x. And we're going to work that out, and we're going to figure out that it's negative 2. So that's an ordered pair, 1, negative 2. I'm going to put it over here on my graph. Now I'm going to put in a negative 1 into that 2x minus 4, and I'm going to get negative 6. Negative 1, negative 6 is going to be down here. It kind of falls off the graph. Don't worry, on a test they'll all be on the graph. All right, then we put in a 3. 3 times 2 minus 4. We get 3, 2. They all do line up. You know you're doing it right when you get a line created. Now let's talk about the slope. I'm going up to get to each little point where it lines up with an integer. I'm going up 2, right 1, up 2, right 1, up 2, right 1, and so on. Up 2, right 1 is the same thing as 2 over 1. And this is the cool part. If you notice, your coefficient was 2, your slope is 2. And then let's talk about the y-intercept. The y-intercept hits the y-axis at negative 4. Your constant in the equation was negative 4. Your y-intercept's negative 4. We're going to explore that more in the upcoming weeks, but that's a huge, huge thing. Moving on. Multi-step equations. Multi-step equations. This can get tricky. For this one, I'm going to get all my variables on one side first. Right now it might be uncomfortable, but let's just make it into something that you're more familiar with. I'm going to add this n to both sides. When I add n to both sides, I get negative n plus 3 equals 27. From here, now it hopefully is looking more familiar. I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. Now this negative n can be thought of as negative 1n. So I'm going to divide out a negative 1. And that means n is negative 24. Now you could use Desmos and plug this side in and then plug this side in to make sure that it does work. And it does. Finally, we have our inequality. Our inequality. Same process as that equation that we just did. I'm going to go ahead and get my n's over to the left side. I like doing that. I'm going to take away my 4n from both sides. Negative 2n, negative 4n is going to give me negative 6n. The minus 8 drops, the negative 20 drops. Now I'm going to add 8 to both sides. And now hopefully it's looking more familiar. Now this coefficient is negative, so when dividing out a negative 6, the inequality sign reverses. And that's going to be a solid dot going to the right. And that is about it. I hope this helps. Best of luck to you.